The Syrian government has collapsed, and the country itself will likely follow as both external and internal forces compete for influence and strive to seize or control as much Syrian territory as possible. Israel and Turkey are considered the winners, as both establish spheres of influence within Syrian territory. Just 48 hours after the Assad regime's collapse, Israeli fighter jets carried out significant airstrikes against targets across Syria. Sensitive military facilities previously belonging to the Syrian army and the Ministry of Defense were destroyed during the December 9th attacks. An arms depot near Damascus International Airport was also targeted. Significant strikes were also reported at the port of Latakia. Amid the chaos caused by HTS taking control of the country, and before any new government can form in Damascus, Israel appears to be actively dismantling Syria's military technology and heavy weaponry stockpiles to prevent them from falling into anyone else's hands. Reporters on the ground stated that Israel's goal is to destroy everything from Assad's military that could fall into rebel hands, from tanks to missiles. Tel Aviv views the end of Assad's regime as an opportunity to disrupt Iran's weapons smuggling routes through Syria to Lebanon's Hezbollah. The Associated Press quoted critics of the attacks, accusing Israel of violating ceasefire agreements and possibly exploiting Syria's chaos to seize territory. Israel is occupying another large swath of Syrian land. It has taken control of Syria's Quneitra city, along with the towns of Al-Qadaniya and Al-Hamadiyya in the Quneitra region. They have also advanced into Syria's Mount Hermon to establish a buffer zone in case Syrian rebels decide to launch an offensive. Thus, the recent airstrikes effectively served to demilitarize Syria. Air defense positions were also targeted. As a result, Syria will be entirely unable to defend itself against external attacks shortly. Similarly, the Biden administration may find satisfaction in the diminishing Russian military presence, as Russia's bases in Latakia province are significantly impacted. The U.S. is also bombing 75 targets in central Syria's desert. While the Biden administration claims these actions aim to eliminate ISIS terrorists, the reality appears to be their intention to neutralize any local resistance forces that might pose a threat to U.S. bases in eastern Syria. Al Jazeera reported that, in a televised speech from the White House, President Biden stated that the collapse of the Assad regime at the hands of the HTS rebel group is an opportunity for the Syrian people to build a better future for their country. He subtly credited himself, explaining that Assad's downfall was due to the weakened states of Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, all of which, he claimed, are significantly less potent than when he first took office. On Turkey's side, the country has special interests in Syria, particularly concerning the Kurdish issue. Turkey is also funding the Syrian National Army, primarily to combat Kurdish separatist groups in Syria. Turkey covertly supported the HTS rebels in seizing Aleppo, destabilizing Assad's regime. However, they did not anticipate that these rebels would go even further. The rapid collapse of Assad's government has now become a headache for Turkey, as the U.S. controls part of eastern Syria and is funding the Syrian Democratic Forces SDF and a faction of Kurds. These Kurdish groups oppose those backed by Turkey. As a result, any Turkish incursion into Syria would face the U.S.-backed Kurdish factions. Meanwhile, Abu Mohammed al-Golani, the leader of HTS, despite being targeted with a $10 million bounty by the U.S., is being celebrated by Western media as a unifying and tolerant new leader for Syria. However, the true nature of HTS remains that of a coalition of radical jihadist factions, with diverse origins and ethnicities. This raises uncertainty about whether internal divisions within HTS will emerge as they begin forming a government and appointing officials. With all the above facts, it is clear that Syria is facing a severe challenge to its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The country is simultaneously grappling with disintegration and the prospect of being carved up by external powers, with Turkey controlling the north, Israel encroaching in the south, U.S. occupation in the east, and a weak central government in Damascus. Together, these factors make it possible for Syria to disappear entirely from the map of West Asia. In recent years, Russia has invested less in the Assad regime. While Russia has indeed protected Syria for many years, it also encouraged President Assad to implement UN Security Council Resolution 2254 from December 2015, which called for sweeping political reforms, including drafting a new constitution and holding UN-supervised elections. Russia even drafted a new constitution for Syria in 2017, but President Assad steadfastly rejected it, as it included many provisions requiring concessions to the opposition. Russia's intervention to rescue Syria in late 2015 was primarily aimed at preventing a wave of terrorism that could threaten the country. This intervention was not solely to ensure Assad's indefinite grip on power. At that time, the Syrian military still had the morale to fight, so Russia primarily conducted airstrikes to support Syrian ground operations. However, instead of focusing on strengthening the military during ceasefires brokered by Russia and preparing adequate defenses around key cities, in case of ceasefire violations, the Syrian army gradually weakened due to corruption. Rather than making political concessions to the opposition as suggested by Russia, President Assad believed he could increasingly rely on Iran's support to hedge against potential reductions in Russian military aid. The outcome has been disastrous. President Assad and his army surrendered to HTS rebels without resistance, leaving behind a significant amount of Russian equipment, which HTS is likely to hand over to Moscow's adversaries for research. Assad did not even address the Syrian people during this critical moment, instead quietly leaving the capital. Nonetheless, as a senior Russian diplomat remarked, Russia granted him asylum. We do not betray our friends. For Iran, Syria's collapse marks the loss of a critical link in its axis of resistance against Israel. The defense lines led by Hezbollah in Lebanon have been dismantled. Once a highly close ally of Iran and a fellow Shia-majority state, Syria is now poised to become an adversary under the Sunni Islamist regime controlled by HTS. Additionally, Iran's weapons supply routes through Syria to Hezbollah and Lebanon are no longer viable. Reports indicate that all Iranian-backed forces have left Syria, representing the most significant strategic defeat for Iran in decades. It can be said that Russia and Iran are the two biggest losers in the Syrian crisis. But who benefits the most from this event? Is it the US, Turkey, or Israel? The Western elites adhering to neoliberal ideologies, who have worked for over a decade to overthrow Assad's regime, are likely the most jubilant about these developments. Western media have whitewashed the terrorist history of HTS leader, Abu Mohammed al-Golani, portraying him as a unifying figure for Syria. In the end, the neoliberal elites have achieved their goal of weakening Russia. The Biden administration can take satisfaction in the fact that Russia's military presence in Syria has been completely diminished, making its bases in Latakia province, western Syria, significantly more vulnerable. Without a doubt, the lame duck Biden administration will be pleased that the next term of President Donald Trump will have to grapple with prolonged instability and uncertainty in West Asia. This region, one of the most oil-rich in the world, will exacerbate risks for Western banking systems and pose challenges to Trump's America First agenda. The Trump administration has consistently regarded China as its primary adversary. However, by plunging Syria and Ukraine into chaos, globalist forces aim to ensure that Trump remains entangled in resolving numerous crises in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. This would delay or derail America's pivot to Asia strategy, giving China more time to build and expand its influence in the Asia-Pacific region, particularly in the South China Sea, while extending its reach globally. Thus, China might be the only nation to emerge as a comprehensive winner from the developments in Syria. Over the weekend of the shocking events in Syria, the future of Russia's military bases along the Latakia coastline remains uncertain. It's important to remember that Russia's Mediterranean base at Khmeimim is a launchpad for its African operations. Undoubtedly, the Biden administration, in its remaining 47 days, will escalate pressure on Syria's new leadership to expel Russian forces from the region. According to unverified information provided by Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Agency, Russia is reportedly withdrawing warships from its Tartus naval base. However, it remains to be seen whether the second key base, Khmeimim, will be retained. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stated that Russian forces currently oversee these bases and operate within secured zones. He emphasized that the future presence of these bases will depend on Syria's new leadership. Russian forces have been in Syria for decades, with Tartus serving as Russia's sole Mediterranean naval port. In 2017, an agreement was signed between Moscow and Damascus, allowing Russian troops to remain at these two bases for approximately 50 years. However, this plan is now clearly in jeopardy. RT reported that Syrian opposition forces have approached Russia's two key military bases, but have neither invaded them, nor shown intentions of doing so. Additionally, these rebel groups have pledged to ensure the safety of Russian military installations and diplomatic facilities. Whether such promises can be trusted is another matter entirely. For now, Russian forces in Syria are undoubtedly on high alert. Notably, unlike the US, which has Kurdish allies, Russia lacks any local support, rendering the position of these bases particularly precarious. This concludes today's commentary. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Goodbye and take care.